To create consistently smooth, delicious creamed honey, a Lyson creamer is a great addition to your honey house. Creamed honey is easily spreadable at room temperature and takes about 2 weeks to make. This is the unheated 50-liter, 13-gallon Lyson creamer. We have larger unheated creamers up to 200 liters, or 52 gallons. And heated creamers up to 36 gallons in size. We also have creamer attachments to make a heated tank into a honey creamer. The first step for making creamed honey is to warm your liquid honey to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Heating melts honey crystals and kills yeasts already present in the honey. People also have success when heating to 120 or 130 degrees Fahrenheit. What we want for creaming honey is a controlled crystallization, using only the tiny honey crystals in previously creamed honey as our starter. Strain the warmed honey and allow it to cool to room temperature. This is so when you put in the creamed honey starter, it doesn't melt. The creamer was thoroughly rinsed and allowed to air dry. We're putting our 80 pounds of heated, strained, and cooled honey into the creamer now. This 50-liter creamer operates on standard 120-volt, 60 Hz U.S. household current. Larger models operate on 240-volt, 60 Hz power. The built-in variable frequency drive takes the household current and converts it to 240-volt, 3-phase variable frequency power to drive the motor in these larger creamers. Don't be alarmed that the motor nameplate lists 240-volt, 3-phase power. It is supplied by the creamer's control unit and provides high torque and reliability across a range of speeds. We're using 10%, or 8 pounds in this case, creamed honey, which is from an earlier batch. If you've never made creamed honey before, you can get your starter by buying some creamed honey from your favorite creamed honey supplier. For those of you who want to make small batches of creamed honey, there are drill attachments that will allow you to use a regular 5-gallon bucket and your own power drill to cream the honey. It does take hours and hours and hours of work to mix it in thoroughly, though. And that's the beauty of the Lyson creamers. Their programs handle the mixing periods and the resting periods automatically. The rest periods are important to include so that the mix does not heat up from constant friction with the mixer paddle. Let's get familiar with the control box. First, make sure the emergency stop button is not pressed. An easy way to do this is to press it in, and then twist and pull it out. That's the fuse. 0 is off, 1 is on. Turning it on. The first thing we're going to adjust is the entire time of the mixing process. It's set here for 24 hours, but we're going to change it to 72 hours. To change to the next setting, hold the stop button down for 5 seconds. The mixer paddle symbol shows 15 minutes for mixing, and the hourglass symbol shows 45 minutes for resting. By pressing start, you can change a setting. Notice I can't go higher. 15 minutes is the max. So I'm going to reduce that, and I'm going to hit stop to lock that in. Touch the arrow button to go down to the lower setting, the hourglass, which is the paddle resting time. Hit start to be able to change the setting. 45 minutes is the minimum. You can only increase it. Press stop to lock it in. You can see that during this mixing action, there's no air being introduced to the mix, or very little. It's more of a gentle folding while the paddle goes around and around. After the creamer is running, you can adjust the speed of the paddle with the arrow buttons. The whole process we're describing here is based on the dice method, invented by Professor E.J. Dice of Cornell University. To review, the steps are: take some liquid honey and warm it to make sure it has no crystals to start out and no yeasts either. Cool it and then strain it, and then mix in 10% of previously creamed honey. Dispense it into its final containers, and then store it for approximately 1 week at about 57 degrees Fahrenheit. If the screen on your controller gives you an e-stop message, an emergency stop message, check these 3 things. First, is the lid shut? This L-shaped piece of metal on the lid should contact the little button that tells the controller the lid is shut, and that L-shaped piece of metal is adjustable. Also, make sure this wire here is firmly plugged in. Lastly, check that emergency button again and make sure that it's out. If there's no lights, no action, nothing, make sure the power switch is on and make sure it's plugged into the wall. And also, you might have to check this fuse here. Once the full cycle of mixing times and resting times is finished, then let your batch settle for about a day in a room that's about 70 degrees. And this way, any bubbles that are in it will rise to the surface and they won't be in your bottles. Now it's important to bottle the creamed honey while it's still in a liquid sort of state, because you can't do that after it's solidified. After you get it all bottled, put those bottles in a place that is approximately 57 degrees, or within 10 degrees of 57 as consistently as you can manage, for approximately a week. And that's when the crystallization happens and everything solidifies to that delicious, spreadable consistency. At that point, you don't have to keep it at that cool temperature anymore. Room temperature, possibly up to 70 or so. It will stay stable, but still scoopable and spreadable. This single case was accidentally allowed to sit in an 85-degree room, and it mostly reliquefied. We did some tests as we made this batch. This jar was filled as soon as the starter looked to be well mixed in, which was just 6 minutes of mixing. And as you can see, the color is darker and the crystals are larger. It wasn't actually mixed long enough. Number 3 was filled after 24 hours of mixing. Number 4 we took at 48 hours, and number 5 at 72 hours. 3, 4, and 5 are only subtly different in looks, and I couldn't tell any difference in taste or mouthfeel. Creamed honey made and held under controlled conditions retains its fine texture, color, appearance, and taste. There's an excellent market for creamed honey if you just give it a try.